Hi everyone, and welcome to another part of the blockchain tutorials of the Web3.js series. So in this part we're going to continue with our code in index.js from the Web3.js library. So we've managed to compile the smart contract and also deploy it. Notice that I've closed, and we should change this, update this private key here, and also no, there's nothing else to update. It's just a private key. So once you open up, once you close and open up the Gnash software again, you need to update your address or private key, because each time they will get updated. For now, let's continue with the code, but once we want to interact with the smart contract, we need to deploy it again, because the address of the deployment has changed, because we're working with the UI, Gnash UI, and it's not all of the time stable and open, and it's not like the test nets that you deploy the smart contract once and then you're good to go and you can anytime come back and interact with that smart contract. Each time that you deploy the smart contract, you need to have the Gnash UI open so that you can continue with the process, or if you're closing the Gnash UI, you will need to reopen it, update the private key, deploy the smart contract, and continue with the process of interacting with the smart contract. So keep that in mind whenever you want to have interactions with the smart contract on the local net. You need to do this every time. So we will get into the test nets as well, but for now it's safer to first test our code on local net, make sure our code is correct, and then continue with the process. So now we're gonna define another async function here, async function, and we're gonna name this transaction here, and the input of this function is JSON file path. The file path we determined for saving the compiled data. So compilation of the data doesn't change, so it doesn't have to be the local net. You just deploy it once and you have the deployed data, actual contract data, the JSON or whatever the name of your compiled data of your contract is. So it should contain the ABI and also the bytecode. Notice that these two don't change if your smart contract hasn't changed. So you don't have to compile the smart contract every time you run your project, but for the deployment you have to whenever you're working with a local net. Anyway, so we'll have Web3 and we'll add address 1. So address 1 is the address of creator of the contract and also the person who's going to transfer the tokens that have been minted, and address 2 is the receiver of those token that has been minted. Deploy.tx is the transaction, actually deployment transaction data that we'll get from this function over here. It's a very long JSON file that you can save and get the data from it, so that later you can use it in order to interact with the smart contract. So we're getting this from this function, and as you can see here, we've deployed the smart contract. We can write, for example, const deploy.tx equals this. So from here we'll get the deploy.tx because it will return the deploy.tx, so we use it in this transaction function. Anyway, let's continue with the async function. So first things first, we need to try to get the file related to compilation of the smart contract, file data, and an ABI bytecode from it. So that's what we do again here in this function. Afterward, what we're gonna do is to get the deployed data from this JSON file. Notice that there are two sets of data that we'll get after the deployment of the smart contract. One is deploy.tx. You can name this anything you want, but this is a very long JSON file containing the information of the deployment and also the address related to data deployment and actually smart contract deployment. Here, as you can see, it's just a simple address. This one most of the time is necessary. Sometimes deploy.tx is not needed, but for now that we want to transfer the tokens, interact with the smart contract with the very same account that deployed it, we need the deploy.tx. Anyway, let's continue with the process. So the next thing I'm going to do is to, so first of all, we need to define file data, and this is going to be equal to fs read file sync. So read the JSON file, and so read file sync, then it will get the JSON file, so it's deployed data.json, and then we will have also UTF-8 here, the next property, UTF-8. So now in the next line we'll have we'll get the data from it. So we will parse the JSON file, contract data equals JSON dot parse, and then we have the file data here. So in the next line we'll have const contract address, so we'll get the contract address from it. Contract address. So it will be the contract data and we'll get from the object we'll get the contract address. So if you look at this JSON file, you will see that we'll get this one, which will result in this, and that's exactly it. So now on the next line we will have const deployed contract, so we'll create the contract using the data that we've got. So const deployed contract, so it will be new Web3.if.contract, and then it will get the ABI and also contract address. So once we do this, we will be able to interact with this smart contract. So this is a really important parameter. So we'll write this function, we'll get the ABI and also the contract address. That's why contract address matters, and this is the address of the deployment of the smart contract that we'll use many times in the future. So next thing we're going to do is to estimate the gas fee for interacting with the smart contracts. So some of the smart contracts that we're working with needs to pay gas fees. This is for especially the times that we want to transfer money, transfer tokens, or interact with the smart contract that needs some kind of payment or transferring and something like that. So for these moments we need to estimate the gas fee. So we'll define gas, so gas estimate, which will equal to new Web3, await. So here is where we use deploy.tx, which is the input of this one and returned by the previous function. So notice that not all the time we use this. Sometimes we go with another different method, but for now let's follow along with this type of getting the deploy.tx and estimating the gas fee. Sometimes we have the object of the transaction, so we create the transaction data and then we estimate the gas fee according to the data we provided in the transaction. So that will be the raw transaction. But here we will use the deploy.txt to do that, because the process is a bit different here. Anyway, so okay, we need to change it a little bit. So okay, like this. So then we'll have from address, which is address 1. And notice that address 1 is the same as the private key that we have, private key 1. So this is the address that deployed the smart contract. This is really important to note. So if there's any other address, you won't be able to interact with the smart contract. Anyway, but in the future you will learn how to also interact with the smart contracts using the accounts that has not deployed the smart contract. So, but for now, let's continue with this guidelines. So const to address equals address 2. So this is the address that's going to receive the tokens that has been minted. So we will also determine the token amount. These are the amount of tokens that, this is the amount of token that we're going to transfer. So for example, here we consider it as 10, could be any other amount. So now is the time to interact with the smart contract, and this is the time that we use the deployed data. So actually the deployed TX. So in order to do so, we will just give me a second, and okay, so deployed we use the deployed contract variable here, deploy contract methods dot transfer, and then we'll get the to address here, to address, and the token amount dot send, and here we'll have two variables from address 1 here, and we'll also have gas, which is equals to gas estimate, and that's it. So let me fix here, and that's it. So we will have, okay, let's go to the next line so that you can better see here. I can also push this to the next line for better vision. So here in the next line, dot then, so once we do that, we will have the receipt. So there will be a receipt for the transaction, and we'll get this and use this here. So let's open the bracket, and in here we'll console.log the receipt. So transaction receipt, and it will equal to receipt here. Here we go. So now the next thing we'll do is, okay, this one is ended here, and so we'll catch the error, otherwise it will catch the error, and then we'll have, let me take a look here. So open the bracket here. Okay, let me just fix something here for a cleaner coding. So we'll console.log the error, or console.error will have error, and here we will console log the error itself. Okay, and that's it. So this is what we do. This is actually what we do for transferring the money, but we're not done yet with the interaction of the smart contract, because we're transferring the tokens from the one account to the other, but we're not done with checking the account balances in terms of their tokens. I don't mean the Ethereum amount, I mean the token that we have minted. So by deploying the smart contract, we will mint the number of tokens that we want. So this number of tokens are created. So we'll need to transfer some of them from the account that deployed it to some other account, right? So that's when we use the transaction, or we can call this transfer token, whatever you like. So let me change this to transfer token. This is a better name, transfer token. And then we will have another function to get the balance. And for that, we don't need to pay any gas fee, right? Because we're just calling the function or calling a variable. So here, let me save the code, and so we'll deploy the smart contract. Once we need to change the private key, so we'll have one private key here for deploying the smart contract and also transferring money. So I'll copy this one here and paste it here. Up to here, we will deploy the smart contract, but I will also need to use this transfer token function in order to interact with the smart contract. So here we use the deploy tx. We need Web3, which we've defined here, and address 1, which we have it here, I think. Yes. So here we should also have the address 1, which is the same account we use for the private keys. So let me define those addresses. So there's one address who who transfers the money, and also another address who receives the tokens. So const address here, address 2. So here we go. And now let's copy and paste the addresses from here. This is the address 1. And for the address 2, we'll have the second address. You can copy any address that you like. But notice that for the first one, the private key and the public key should be the same. And notice that it's not safe to write the private key that way. We'll need to write it inside of the environment variables, I mean this one, because it's not safe to give it to anyone. It's better to save it inside of an environment variables or .env file. But for now, because we're on the local net and it's Ganache UI, there will be no problem. In the future, you will learn how to contain it in .env file and contain .env file in .gitignore in order not to share your private data to your even colleagues or teammates. So make sure you do that if you're working with the testnet or mainnet, because that is super important and you need to do it. But we'll do this in the future, so don't worry if you don't know how to do this. This is just the beginning steps of you learning the Web3.js. So for now, we can just be fine. And now it's time to deploy our smart contract and also interact with it. So once you open the terminal, you can run node index.js. Oh, there seems to be a problem. We should check the error. Contract data is not defined. So we have a contract data variable here. So it should be okay, somewhere we're probably having a problem. So that's here. It shouldn't be camel case. It should be like this. So I'm gonna save this and rerun it. There seems to be another error, so let's take a look. So this is not a function. It's saying that deploy tx.estimate gas fee, estimate gas is not a function. So let's take a look and see whether it is or not. So there should be a problem here, but we need to make sure if there are any problems with that. So let's take a deeper look here. Await deploy tx dot estimate gas. So generally, technically, this one should be a function, but probably this is the version problem with the Web3 version. So we'll need to check this one further in order to make sure that everything's fine. So the only reason that is happening is that we need to wait for this function to finish because it takes some time, and then we will go after this one. So because these two are asynchronous functions, we need to execute them sequentially, right? So in order to do so, let's define a function here and try to execute them sequentially, just the same as what I said. So async function here, async function execute sequentially, and so it will get nothing if we have everything inside of the function. So here we go, and let's get all of the lines one by one and push them forward here like this, and now we will have a wait before deploy and also a wait before transfer token. So once we do that, we will wait for deploy to finish, and then we'll go after transfer token, and we'll make sure that deploy is finished and we have the deploy tx so that we can get started with the transfer token. Now we can save this one and then run execute sequentially like this. So copy this and paste it right over here. Also, we can delete these ones, save this, and rerun our code. As you can see, it worked and we have the results just the way we wanted. So the transfer has completed, and we can see the deployed address here. We can see the data related to transaction receipts, and we can see that from this address to this address the transfer has been done. So we can see some other data related to the transfer, block hash, address. So we'll work with these variables in the future, and notice that in the next part we will also check the balances of the two accounts so that we can check how many tokens do they have to make sure that we have actually transferred the tokens in a correct way. So we can also head over to Ganache and take a look at the transaction data here. So as you can see, we have contract call, we have contract creation, this is a deployment, and this is a contract call. You can see the very same data right over here, the gas price, gas limit, mint blocks, and so on. So in the next part, we'll also check the balances, write a code in order to call the functions in the smart contract and check the balances. So until the next video, goodbye.